Hello everyone, this is CJ with Cyclotron. Well, in this video I'm going to cover two main things. First is why you'd consider a performance tune along with possible performance upgrades to your street motorcycle for street or track use. I'll also cover the various options for how you can go about getting your bike tuned. The second part of this video is to go over the details associated with the performance upgrades and tune that I had done to my 2020 Suzuki Katana by Chris Moore at Moore Mafia in Taylor, South Carolina. I'll tell you now though that those upgrades made a huge improvement in an already great performing motorcycle. I've really been riding the wheels off that thing since I've been home from South Carolina. Also, I want to say right off the top that this video is not sponsored by anybody. I'm giving you my own view and feedback from my experience of having this done on my motorcycle. This is the first time I've ever had any upgrades or certainly a tune done on one of my motorcycles. So I'm really glad I had it done. I kind of realize now what I may have been missing all these years, but I also think I've got the right bike for these upgrades. So I recently found Chris's channel. I say recently as in a few months ago. He operates out of their dealership in Taylor, South Carolina, Cycle Specialties Performance. They sell a variety of Japanese motorcycles. And I noticed on his YouTube channel that he does a lot of videos on tuning these bikes as well as his drag race videos, which I think are really interesting. So I noticed on his channel he had done a lot of tunes for Suzuki motorcycles. He had also done some on GSX S1000. So that bike and my Katana share the same K5 engine platform, which goes back to the 2005 through 2008 model year GSX X R1000 motorcycle. Very tried and true, high performing power plant. What also appealed to me when you watch his videos is not the typical big increases in performance that you get, but more importantly to me, you could see that the power band's way smoother, way more linear, and that's something that I was particularly looking for in having my bike tuned by him. I can also tell that he's really a master at what he does and has a strongly technical yet energetic approach to his work, which really appeals to me. That's the type of detail work that I do, not tuning motorcycles, but in my own field. So just his work style appealed to me and thought it'd be a fun trip to take the family down there over Labor Day weekend, which we did. But first, why would you want to tune your bike in the first place? Well, certainly if you swap out to a full exhaust system, the increase in airflow is probably going to make your bike run worse, even though you may like the improvement in the sound. If you're only going to go with a slip-on exhaust or a higher performing air filter, you probably don't need a tune, but you still would probably benefit from one, and I'll explain that here in a bit. I'll also say right off the top, I'm not recommending using something like a booster plug, as this is an overly simplified, non-customizable option to basically try and force your bike to run richer. I've had at least one viewer comment that he thought the booster plug was a waste of time and money. I mean, with shipping, it's going to cost you $200, and then you got to put it on, so don't recommend that. I also don't recommend going with a power commander either, since your ECU is still going to have all the factory restrictions on it, and you'll have to experiment with the power commander in adjusting the air fuel mapping on a trial and error basis. Plus, you know, the power commander costs more than a mail-in ECU flash with Moore Mafia, and nearly as much as getting the ECU flash and having it dynoed at Moore Mafia. The only time, in my view, where a power commander might make sense is if you're trying to set up your bike for racing and you already have a flash on your ECU, but then you want a different mapping for racing or for a different fuel, then it may make sense to have your power commander work in conjunction with your flashed ECU. So even without a change in exhaust systems, many bikes that are now fuel injected are also ride-by-wire, and they often have snatchy throttle response at low RPM, or there's an abrupt and total shutoff of fueling when rolling off the throttle. And this can make the bike dive forwards and backwards on the front forks. An ECU flash can optimize the air-fuel mixture throughout the power curve and eliminate such fueling problems and make for a much smoother riding experience. You can also have other restrictions removed involving premature redline fueling cutoff, and also go with a lower, say, fan temperature setting so your bike doesn't run as hot. But let's get back to the tuning options. You can go check out Chris's website. Note that they only offer these services on Japanese motorcycles. So the first option is to take the ECU off your bike and send it in to Moore Mafia by mail or some other delivery service. I'd definitely get your shipment insured for the replacement cost of the ECU in case something happened in shipment. Before doing this, I would also confirm that your bike is eligible for a tune by checking out his website. Here are some of the candidate bikes listed here. Now, it's important to note that his ECU flashes are based on the tune of motorcycles that he has run on his dyno. I would also confirm what type of modifications were included with your particular bike that he's got the dyno and tune for. That way you'll know ahead of time how much improvement in performance you could expect. This option costs around $265 currently. Again, you'll want to confirm with Chris at the time of your tune, plus shipping each way. Once they get the ECU, they say they'll turn it around typically within a day or two and get it shipped back to you. So obviously your bike's not going to run without the ECU in the meantime, so be prepared to be off your bike for a few days while the ECU is going there and back. So when I called Chris, I confirmed that he hadn't done a 2020 Katana yet, but he had done a recent GSX S1000 with an M4 exhaust. I'd say that even if I wasn't looking for a reason to take a road trip and I was okay with the M4 exhaust, I could have just gone with this cheaper option to send my ECU in for flashing. But as I mentioned, I wanted to make the trip, plus I preferred the sound of the Brock's pentacarbon exhaust, so I made the trip. I picked the exhaust after listening to several different aftermarket upgrades to 2020 Katanas that I found on YouTube. The next step is to take your bike to his operation in Taylor, South Carolina, where they'll put on any performance upgrades on your bike first, or you might have done that yourself ahead of time. And then they'll get it on the dyno, and Chris will do the ECU flashing. The flash and the dyno in person currently costs $575 at the time of this video. And there's extras if you're going to use non-pump gas, say for tracking the bike. This is a good option if you have the time to make the trip and turn it into a mini vacation like me and my family did. The nearby cities of Greer and Greenville are simply beautiful. I was really impressed. My previous trips to South Carolina had been to the Charleston area in the late 80s, and I was really impressed with Greenville and Greer. A lot of great places to eat out at restaurants, and just a wonderful place to walk around in and enjoy some time with your family while you're getting your bike performance improved dramatically. So coming up, I'll go over specifically what they did to improve the performance on my bike and what the results were. But I first want to mention that the last tuning option is remote tuning. This is where they tune your motorcycle over the internet. This involves connecting some specialty hardware and software and riding your bike before each remote connection to Chris so that he can make the adjustments remotely to the ECU. The bike stays in your possession the whole time. I understand this option costs around $1,200. And I guess there is one other option technically, and that is to have a second ECU. Whether you buy it from the OEM manufacturer on eBay, for example, and that way you could get that ECU set up for your track day riding and fueling and just swap it out when you do track the bike. Finally, whatever you decide for your ECU flash, you'll not only need to decide what modifications, if any, you'll have done to your motorcycle first, you'll also have to decide what ECU restrictions you want to have eliminated. You'll also have to decide if you want a quieter exhaust note, or you're going to go with the full loud pops, bangs, and flames on D-cell, which are not for me, by the way. I didn't go that way. I liked a little throatier exhaust note, but nothing that's going to ruin the peace with me and my neighbors, but not so obnoxious that it made me a public enemy #1 in my area. But anyway, I'm not too concerned about that. It's just I'm more of a low profile guy myself. So let's get into what I did specifically for my 2020 Katana. Since I only had one day in Taylor's for the work, and they're going to be installing the upgrades in advance of the tune, there was no time to do a baseline pull for the dyno. I had done enough research by watching Chris's videos. I knew really about how much performance improvement to expect, but again, I was more interested in smoothing out the power curve, having a more linear throttle response. So the upgrades I went with were a full Brock's pentacarbon exhaust system with a high flow Sprint air filter. I also deleted the massive restrictor plate that came stock for the bike's air intake. I also went with front and rear sprocket changes, 17 to 15 teeth in the front and 44 to 46 teeth in the rear. The front sprocket is forged steel and the rear sprocket is cast aluminum, which will give better performance but won't last as long as the steel OEM sprocket. The next time I change the sprockets, I think I'll go with a rear sprocket that has steel teeth composited with an aluminum sprocket. So here's Drew with Cycle Specialties Performance doing the performance upgrades to my bike. This took about 4 hours, and I'm glad I didn't mess with it myself, as I noticed he had to take the radiator off and there was a lot of detailed work associated with the upgrades. So we hung out for a while and we talked with Tim Bath about their operation. Tim also gave me a tour of the various bikes that they had on hand and showed me Chris and his brother's bikes that they use for drag racing. It's possible that these bikes exceed over 800 horsepower with the turbos. So since these bikes are used in grudge races, the exact horsepower figures aren't available. So here's the dyno chart that was produced for my 2020 Katana when Cycle World reviewed the bike back in 2019. They showed a peak horsepower of 139 and a peak torque of 76 foot-pounds at 10,100 and 9,100 RPM respectively. Again, I really didn't care about the baseline dyno, but it's here just for interest's sake. Other places I read that the bike was rated about 136 horsepower stock. So first, Chris put the flash on my ECU using his dyno tune of the GSX S1000 with the M4 exhaust. He then did several dyno runs, making adjustments to the ECU settings in between. Now you'll note that when my bike was run on the dyno, the temperature was 88 degrees with a high humidity of over 50%. So no doubt performance would be even better with riding in slightly cooler weather. But I'm not really concerned about the change in peak performance. I wanted better throttle response and certainly more low to mid-range power, and I got it in spades. So here is Chris comparing some changes between the initial and the final dyno runs. Yeah, that is smooth.
153. And of course, we'll pull up the original. That's your before and after. So you can see, even at 4,000 RPMs, it gained 3 horsepower. You know what I mean? All that stuff is stuff you're going to feel. But right here, from 65 to 71 foot-pounds of torque, that's a huge gain. And then here on your torque, from 72 to 79. So not only did we get the torque a little earlier, but we also made it hit a lot harder and smooth it out a ton right there. So all that stuff is stuff you're going to feel a lot. And then right here, where the thing started to nose over, went from 138 to 152. So big gains there.
That's awesome.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, that's huge.
Should be fun.
But more importantly, there was a lot more torque in the low to mid range, as well as more horsepower, and that's where you really feel it. I mean, again, this is where I spend 99% of my riding time, and that's in the low to mid range RPMs. So getting performance gains in that area is really important. And I certainly feel it when I'm out riding the bike now. Also, here's a quick clip of what my bike sounded like before and after I had the upgrades. As I've stated, I'm extremely happy with the work that Chris Moore and Moore Mafia did for me on this 2020 Katana. I have a 2023 Gen 3 Hayabusa on order, so please stay tuned for future videos about that bike and what my impressions are riding it. Also, if you found this video to be interesting or at all helpful, please hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching, everyone.